As covered in Chapter Evolved Package System Network, the UE initiate the attach procedure by establishing a radio connection towards the base station it hears the strongest. The UE will be given several identities during the attach. The cell RNTI is given by the eNode B to uniquely identify a UE on the air interface. MME allocates an STMC to the UE and PDN gateway an IP address. During the attach procedure, a default bearer will be set up. This will include a radio bearer as well as network tunnels or bearers to within the core network. If the end user, after powering on its mobile, chooses to be inactive, he or she does not initiate a service. The radio bearer and the S1 bearer will be released. Since the radio is dropped, the UE doesn't need to have an identity on the radio either. The two other identities, as well as the S5/S8 default bearer, will remain as long as the UE is attached. The reason for keeping the bearer is something you can learn more of in the chapter Traffic Case Service Establishment. But now, time for focusing on the attach traffic case. The pictures describe what happens between the UE and the eNode B on the air interface. The color scheme is as follows. Red indicates what is signaled on the physical layer, blue indicates the MAC layer, and green upper layers. When the UE is powered on, it needs to find and read the broadcast control channel carrying the master information block, but it also needs to read the information in the system information blocks. Our mobile wants to establish a radio resource, and therefore needs to learn about the random access resource. This information is carried in SIB2. You can learn more about the SIBs and the MIB in the Spec Tool chapter RRC protocol. SIB2 is sent on a shared channel, so the UE needs to be informed where it is scheduled on the radio resource. The scheduling information is sent on physical downlink control channel with the cyclic redundancy check scrambled with the system information RNTI. By reading the physical downlink control channel, the UE will learn where the physical downlink shared channel containing SIB2 will be broadcasted. In this example, the SIB2 holds the information that subframe 3 is available for transmitting a random access preamble on the uplink. So now our UE is transmitting a random access preamble in subframe 3. Please note that this is on the uplink radio frame. Earlier, we saw that the identity used on the radio interface is called RNTI. But at this stage, the mobile does not have an RNTI. So what happens is that the eNode will remember which preamble the UE used, in our example, preamble X, and on which uplink radio resource it was sent. The uplink radio resource used forms the random access RNTI. In each cell, there are 64 preambles to choose among. Everywhere else on the radio, the eNode B is in charge of which UE is transmitting and which is receiving. But the random access resource is out of control of the eNode B. The eNode B schedules the resource, but how it is used and by which UE is unpredictable. It is a contention-based resource. The UEs are competing with each other. So, when our UE chooses preamble X, it cannot be sure that it is the only one using it at this very moment. So, several UEs can use the same preamble, but the eNode B can continue only with one of them. This is called contention resolution. The other UEs need to try again. You can learn more about the preambles and the contention resolution in the Spec Tool Chapter RRC and Mac. Here we continue with a happy UE not suffering from any collisions. The UE is now listening on the downlink to see if it is scheduled. So it is searching in the physical downlink control channel for its random access RNTI. On physical downlink control channel, the UEs are more or less blindly decoding the information. You can learn more about that in the Spec Tool Physical Layer 36.213. The MAC PDU transmitted on a physical downlink shared channel is called Random Access Response. This is the only MAC PDU intended to be addressed to more than one UE. The reason is that all the UEs that have used the same uplink random access radio resource have the same random access RNTI, but they used different preambles. So within the MAC PDU, the eNode B separates them with the preambles. The eNode B gives each of them a temporary cell RNTI, an uplink grant to speed up the process, and a timing advance value. Since the UE is already allocated an uplink resource, it doesn't need to search in the physical downlink control channel. It will now send the first real message to the eNode B, an RRC message indicating that the UE wants to establish radio. The preamble sent previously is just a code. The message is sent on physical uplink shared channel, but the upper layers are not yet configured. So here, signaling Radio Bureau 0 on the common control channel with RLC in transparent mode is used. In the message, the UE will include its STMC, or if it doesn't have an STMC, it adds a random number. The UE will also inform the eNode B about the reason for establishing the radio resource. This is important in case of emergency. The UE is now searching in physical downlink control channel if its temporary cell RNTI is represented, and when it is found, get the information of where the MAC PDU is scheduled. In the Connection Setup RRC message, the UE will receive the configuration of Signaling Radio Bureau 1, but the message itself is still sent on Signaling Radio Bureau 0. The eNode B and the UE are also communicating on the MAC level. The eNode B mirrors the STMC back to the UE, so there should no longer remain any confusion regarding the previous contention situation. Before the UE can answer the setup message with an RRC connection setup complete, it needs to receive the scheduling information on the downlink physical downlink control channel. But it also requires some time to construct the MAC PDU. Therefore, it is a time gap of 4 milliseconds between the scheduling on the downlink and the transmitting on the uplink. The RRC Connection Setup Complete message is sent on Signaling Radio Bureau 1 on the dedicated control channel with a configuration as received earlier. The RRC Connection Setup Complete contains NOS information which is intended to be read by the MME. Since we are following an attach procedure, the NOS message will be attach request. Once again, we see the RRC Connection Complete message, but now focusing on the NOS information it contains. The NOS layer is divided into two sublayers, Evolved Packet System Mobility Management Layer and Evolved Packet System Session Management Layer, here represented by light brown and darker brown. Message content is in brackets, of course not everything, but the essential for this traffic case. If you are interested in the full message content, please go to the Spec Tool NOS and RRC. So, the RRC connection setup complete message contains the EMM message attach request holding MC, but attach request is also piggybacking the ESM message PDN connectivity request. This is a request from the UE for an IP address. In UMTS and GPRS, the IP address is handed out to the UE when a service is established and is released when the service ends. This is not the case in LTE. LTE relies only on IP no-circuit switching. So, the UE needs to have an IP address during the whole time it is attached, otherwise it is not a part of the Internet. The NOS information is relayed by the eNode B into the S1AP initial UE message. In this message, the eNode B will include the identity of the tracking area in which it is currently located. Let's assume that the end user is powering on his mobile abroad, hence in a visited network. By looking on the MC value, the MME in the visited network can contact the correct operator in the home country of the end user. In the HSS, the MC is used to point out the correct user subscription and from that generate security parameters. Please check out the Spec Tool NOS if you want to have more information about this. The authentication and security-related signaling concerns only the MME and the UE. Therefore, this signaling is carried in NOS transport messages on the S1 interface and in information transfer messages on the AIR interface. So the eNode B is not reading or adding anything, just passes the messages on. The AUTN parameter is used to verify the home operator and RES to validate the SIM card. If the validation is successful, the MME will instruct the UE to start using ciphering and integrity check. From this point on, the messages between the MME and the UE are protected, hence NOS protection. The MME is now satisfied with the authentication and validation of the SIM card, thereby contacting the HSS in the home country once again to update the location in the HSS. From the HSS, the MME receives PDN contexts. A PDN context contains information about APN, logical address of PDN gateway, and EPS bearer context. One of the provided PDN contexts will be marked by the HSS as the default one. If the end user is roaming, the visited MME will use information about default APN to select a PDN gateway. The selected PDN gateway may be located in home PLMN or in visited PLMN, depending on subscriber parameter setting. When an LTE mobile is powered on, it will be allocated an IP address from PDN gateway, as described earlier. But there is no signaling interface defined between the MME and the PDN gateway. Hence, the signaling needs to go via the serving gateway. What will also happen is that bearers will be established in the core network, no matter if the end user indicates service establishment or not. As long as the UE is attached, the bearer between serving gateway and PDN gateway will be kept. The reason for this is that from the PDN gateway's point of view, the UE is always logged on from an IP perspective. You can learn more about the reason for this in Chapter Traffic Case, Service Establishment. A bearer within Evolved Packet Core is defined by an IP address and a tunnel endpoint identity, but it also represents a quality of service level. Before the bearer is established, The PDN gateway will check with the IMS platform which quality of service to apply. Please go to the Spec Tool chapter NOS if you want to learn more of the parameters sent between the PDN gateway and policy and charging rules function. The reason for sending up the user location information to IMS is that it can be used as a basis for charging decisions. Some of the information received by the MME from the rest of the core network concerns the eNode B and some the UE. The initial context setup request message is the first communication from the MME to the eNode B, so not until now is the eNode B aware of if the UE has been accepted by the core network or not. Therefore, it is now the ciphering keys to be used on the air interface are provided to the eNode B. The IP address and tunnel endpoint identity of serving gateway are also passed on to the eNode B, since the S1 tunnel is established between the eNode B and the serving gateway. Please note that the MME is never a part of the user plane. The initial context setup request message also includes the NOS message attach accept, aimed for the UE. It includes the IP address and the limitations of the bitrate, AMBR for this IP address, APN, as well as the STMC assigned to the UE by the MME. The attach accept message is delivered to the UE in the RRC connection reconfiguration message. The answer to an RRC connection reconfiguration is always an empty RRC connection reconfiguration complete. The answer on NOS level therefore needs to be in a separate message. The last part is the MME passing on the information of the eNode B settings of the S1 bearer to the serving gateway. The signaling phase is now over and the user plane established. If the end user now activates a service or if there is an incoming service, the network will check if the QS of this default bearer is good enough. If not, additional dedicated bearers will be established. Learn more on this subject in Chapter Traffic Case Service Establishment. If the end user instead chooses to be inactive, the radio bearer and the S1 bearer will be released. The reason behind this is that radio spectrum is an asset that cannot be reinvented, just utilized as efficient as possible. How quickly the radio resource will be released is depending on the implementation, but is a value measured in seconds.